If you own Apple stock or are thinking about buying, stop what you're doing right now because there have been a few massive updates that could completely change your investment thesis. We're talking potential CEO changes, major acquisitions, and geopolitical risks heating up fast. And at the end, I'll break down exactly what I think Apple investors need to do today to protect profits and even find upside in the chaos. Let's get into it, starting with the first and least impactful update: tariffs. The US just proposed a new round of tariffs targeting Chinese-made electronics, and while Apple hasn't been hit directly yet, it's getting dangerously close. And this matters because Apple's supply chain still leans heavily on China. If these tariffs go through, Apple's profit margins could take a serious hit. We're talking 25%, which is tens of billions of dollars.
Well, it's really bad for Apple. I mean, if these tariffs go into action, then what you're going to see is Apple's either going to have to do a price increase on the phones, or it's going to have to maybe roll back some of that buyback it planned, or try to rethink its dividend. Those are the three areas that you end up looking to try to get the relief here. And if it's an increase in price on the phone, we know that the services part of Apple's business is what's driving this stock. And services to grow needs users, which means that Apple needs those customers. And that's why Apple has been reticent to raise the price on these phones, because it knows the thing that's driving its valuation isn't necessarily iPhone sales, although those are important. It is the fact that people are using its services, and that area is growing, and investors are looking at that and adding a multiple or applying a multiple to it. So if you see a big increase, I don't think Apple's going to bring the phone back here, but that tariff could end up increasing the price of the phone. That is going to make the company struggle in its attempt to grow that services business, and we could end up seeing some serious negative consequences because of it.
That was a longtime Apple investor, and his take is spot on. Here's the key takeaway: Apple's not just a hardware company anymore, it's a services company. That's what Wall Street is actually valuing right now. And the services business? It only grows if Apple can keep iPhones in users' hands. So if tariffs force Apple to raise iPhone prices, that threatens user growth. And if they try to absorb the cost, it squeezes margins and might reduce buybacks or even pressure their dividend strategy. Either way, it's a lose-lose. That's why this tariff threat, while not the most dramatic headline, is something Apple investors can't ignore. Because if it messes with Apple's flywheel of iPhones, services, recurring revenue, buybacks, stock growth, that ripple effect could hit earnings harder than anyone expects. And unfortunately, it doesn't stop with tariffs, because Apple's biggest moneymaker, the services business, is now facing a second front of pressure: regulation.
We also know that the money that's coming in from Google to be the default search on iPhones, that's at risk because of regulatory action. We also know that the fees that Apple collects in the App Store, those are at risk because now there's a chance that Apple might not be able to prevent app developers from telling people that they can go elsewhere and get the subscription cheaper, right? There's been policies within the App Store that has been impossible, and there's other regulatory effects that might take impact. So when you think about this service business, which again has been driving the stock, you now have the threat from tariffs, the threat from regulation, and the potential loss of that Google money. And now Apple will probably be able to get past a number of these issues. But to expect them to become entirely unscathed after such a situation is a lot.
He's absolutely right. Let's break that down. First, Google. Right now, Apple reportedly receives $18 to $20 billion a year from Google to stay the default search engine on iPhones. That's straight profit. No R&D, no logistics. Just high margin recurring cash. But if regulators block that deal, that's billions in annual revenue gone overnight. Then there's the App Store. For years, Apple has taken up to 30% of revenue from apps, especially subscriptions, while preventing developers from even telling users about cheaper options outside the App Store. But now, that walled garden is under attack. In Europe, the Digital Markets Act is already forcing Apple to open up, and US lawmakers are watching closely. If Apple loses that fee advantage across its app ecosystem, it doesn't just hurt revenue, it erodes the moat that's protected them for a decade. So now you've got three simultaneous threats hitting the same core engine: tariffs threatening iPhone demand, regulation threatening App Store profits, and the potential loss of Google's search deal, which cuts off a huge cash pipeline. None of these alone is a death sentence, but all together, it's a perfect storm for Apple's services business, and by extension, its valuation. And we haven't even gotten to the most shocking update yet, right? But for now, let's circle back to the tariff situation, because while it's a real threat, there may be a way out.
Absolutely. Well, look, Apple, again, nearly a $3 trillion company. It probably was when they were talking. Now it's just below. And the amount of jobs that you would expect from a $3 trillion company, if you're kind of thinking old school and not in a technology way, is massive. But a lot of the jobs that are involved in manufacturing these phones are elsewhere. So it seems like Tim Cook is going to have to bring some jobs to the United States one way or another to be able to appease Trump. Now, I'm just speculating here, but I imagine that when Tim Cook met with Trump, Trump said, we need you to bring jobs to the U.S. Tim Cook probably said, okay, yeah, we're going to do that, Mr. President. And then, he sees that the manufacturing has moved to India instead of China, and that's led to this blow up. So I would imagine that for this to blow over, Tim Cook is going to have to basically make a concession to Trump. Maybe it's just ceremonial 2,000 or 3,000 jobs that come in for manufacturing, or they put the final stamp on the package and they say, okay, this has been assembled or completed in the United States. But he's going to have to do something, because I think you're right. There's got to be something wrong with this relationship for Trump to not just now, but repeatedly hit Cook. He hit him in Saudi Arabia. He's again talking about tariffs. It doesn't seem like things are as hunky-dory as they were in the first term.
That's the part most people are missing. Apple isn't powerless here. Tim Cook has been a master at navigating political landmines, and this could just be another one. If he makes the right moves, like bringing a few thousand manufacturing jobs to the US, or shifting final assembly to places like Arizona or Texas, he might be able to dodge the worst of it. It wouldn't be the first time Apple adjusted its narrative for political optics. So yes, these are major issues. Tariffs could hit margins. Regulation could crush App Store profits. Losing that Google search deal, billions in cash flow gone. But let's keep it real. None of these things will put Apple out of business. They'll hurt, they'll slow growth, they might even cap the stock's upside for a while, but Apple will survive. However, there's one issue that could be an existential threat, one that almost no one's talking about, and if Apple doesn't solve it soon, it won't just slow down, it could implode. We're talking about AI. And here's the thing, Apple already flopped their first move. Apple Intelligence was supposed to be their big reveal, but it landed with a thud. The upgrade to Siri was underwhelming. The AI tools were basic. And worst of all, most of it won't even ship until 2025. For a company that's late to the AI game, that's not just disappointing, it's dangerous. But what's way more concerning isn't what Apple did, it's what someone else just did. OpenAI just made a $6.5 billion move, and it could change the future of consumer tech forever.
Believe this was happening, and that's because Johnny Ive, he left 6 years ago. He left Apple to start this new design firm called Love From, and a few years later he ended up poaching some of the top design talent at Apple, brought them over to his new startup, and now that startup is called IO, is being bought by OpenAI for $6.5 billion, at least in stock in OpenAI. And this really paints a picture of Apple under the Tim Cook era, which, by the way, the performance speaks for itself. Just look at the stock, look at the growth numbers. Massive success there. There's no question about that. However, there's also been this growing schism of thought around what's happening at Apple. This idea that the design-forward, innovative hardware products has gone since Johnny Ive left the company. And now Johnny Ive is here. We just saw that video of him with Sam Altman. He and Sam Altman are saying, we've created this amazing new product that is going to kind of wean you off the iPhone. It's going to be focused on AI. All the stuff that we talk about Apple kind of missing out on, Johnny Ive is now bringing that as a potential rival over there. And at the same time, we've seen Apple kind of stumble out of the gate to get innovative products out. The Vision Pro has not exactly been the breakout product that Apple and so many other people probably hoped it would be. And then, of course, this year, that big artificial intelligence miss when they failed to deliver on that Siri upgrade. At the same time, we're seeing OpenAI, they're putting enormous pressure on themselves, guys. So they say, whatever this mystery project is, they're saying what it's not. It's not a phone, it's not glasses, it's not something you wear, like that Humane pin that was a flop. This is gonna be something else.
Let that sink in. The man who designed the iPhone, Johnny Ive, the guy who helped make Apple what it is today, just joined forces with Sam Altman to build something that could replace the iPhone entirely. Not a phone. not glasses, something new, something AI native, and it's being built outside of Apple. That's not just a headline, that's a warning shot across the bow. Because here's the brutal truth, while Apple is still polishing its first AI feature set, the most legendary product designer in its history is now working on a rival device with the most powerful AI lab on Earth. And this isn't some little startup, it's backed by $6.5 billion in OpenAI stock and a mission to build the next great consumer hardware platform from scratch. Meanwhile, Apple, they're tweaking Siri, and that is the real threat, because if Jony Ive and Sam Altman succeed, it won't just hurt Apple's AI credibility, it could make the iPhone obsolete. And here's the part that should make every Apple investor stop and think, this isn't some vanity project or experimental prototype. Inside OpenAI, Sam Altman is telling people this is a $1 trillion opportunity. They're not aiming for a niche device or a fancy tech demo. They're aiming to build the third device, the one that comes after the phone, and watch. And if they're right, this isn't just competition for Apple, it's a direct threat to the iPhone itself.
Sam was saying to folks inside the company that he thought this could elevate them to become a $1 trillion proposition.
Yeah.
And that we're talking about not just a device that's going to go, be
There's
millions.
like a third device.
But like hundreds of millions.
He said 100 million.
100 million, that's huge.
That's huge, but keep in mind there are a billion iPhones in the world. So there's a long way to go from there. And he also didn't say, according to this Wall Street Journal report, we're not gonna make 100 million overnight.
Right.
It's gonna take some time to get there, but we're gonna get there faster than anyone ever has.
Think about what you just heard. Altman's goal is 100 million units, not eventually, faster than anyone ever has, and sure, Apple still has over 1 billion iPhones in the wild. But that's exactly the point. This is the first real shot we've seen at challenging that dominance, and it's coming from the former king of Apple design and the current king of AI. And right now, Apple isn't moving nearly fast enough to stop it. And look, it's not just about selling 100 million units. It's about what those 100 million units actually replace. Because according to Jony Ive and Sam Altman, this isn't just a new gadget, it's a new paradigm.
Jony Ive's new group, he's calling it IO, that's working on devices. They're sounding like they have a breakthrough. We're watching this video right now that Jony Ive put up with Sam Altman, and they're talking about, he even mentions these people by name, saying, hey, we have this breakthrough that can, new paradigm basically for hardware in this AI era. And this is coming from the guy, Kelly, who invented the iPhone.
Oh, totally. How can you have a breakthrough for AI? How can you have a hardware breakthrough for AI? To do what exactly?
And that's what Sam Altman in this video I was talking about, he says, it's really hard when you want to ask AI a question. You probably experienced this. You have to open it up. You have to open up the web browser and type things in. And they're kind of hinting at this kind of background device that is maybe always listening or always on, and it's easier to ask questions
I don't want another device, and it's easy for me on my phone. I just hit the ChatGPT app, or I hit Grok, and Grok will say, if I start dictating, it goes, do you just want to talk to me?
You don't want another device, Kelly, but let me quote Eddie Q, an Apple executive who was testifying in this Google trial a couple weeks ago. He said, in 10 years, you might not need an iPhone because of AI. He said that. The iPhone company is saying you might not need an iPhone, and here we are, a company, OpenAI, saying we have a breakthrough here. We're going to show you next year what this magical hardware product that the designer of the iPhone came up with.
Think about what they're saying here. This isn't just a more convenient way to ask questions. They're describing a fundamentally different interface. Something that's always on, always listening, always ready. No apps, no typing, no unlocking a phone. It's the kind of shift that could make smartphones feel clunky overnight. Just like how the iPhone made BlackBerries and flip phones feel ancient in 2007. And here's the crazy part. Even Apple knows this. Their own executive, Eddie Q, literally said in court, in 10 years, you might not need an iPhone because of AI. That's coming straight from Cupertino, so now zoom out. You've got the guy who designed the iPhone teaming up with the guy who built ChatGPT to launch a mysterious new device that could replace the iPhone at the exact moment Apple is struggling to find its footing in AI. This isn't just another product announcement. This is an existential threat to the most important product in Apple's history. And if this next move doesn't land, everything, the growth story, the margins, the ecosystem starts to crack. And if that iPhone foundation starts to crack, Apple doesn't just lose a product, it loses the platform that powers its entire ecosystem, from App Store revenue to services growth to global brand dominance. Now, some investors are hoping Apple just partners with OpenAI, but that doesn't seem too likely.
Why can't Apple also be partnered ultimately with OpenAI and deliver this, and maybe even with this hardware? It just seems to me Apple is still the platform.
So Apple's a platform today, and they could definitely do some form of a partnership. They're working with OpenAI today. But the fact that they brought on a design team, a hardware design team, and the fact that that's one of Apple's core competencies, I think was a shot across the bow. And so I think that this is, as I mentioned, I think it is a wake-up call for Apple and to a lesser extent Google. And I would say even the bigger picture here is, at least for Apple as it pertains to what's to move forward, is that if you look at Tim Cook is an incredible CEO. I can't say enough good things about him. I think the same as Sundar is a great CEO, Jassy. But these are peacetime CEOs. And what happened today, this was a shot across the bow that this is war when it comes to AI. It's not just going to be stick to your models and we'll do our thing and we'll partner with you. We're going to get into your business is basically the message here.
So yes, Apple is working with OpenAI right now. They're integrating ChatGPT into Siri, but let's be real. When OpenAI acquires a hardware design firm, especially one founded by Jony Ive, that's not just a partnership, that's a power move. Hardware has always been Apple's greatest strength, so for OpenAI to say, we're going to do that ourselves now, that's a direct challenge. And it's more than just product strategy, it's leadership, because this AI shift, it's not a product refresh, it's not a new screen size, this is war. And as the clip said, Tim Cook has been a peacetime CEO, he's a world-class operator, he built Apple into a $3 trillion machine. But this next phase requires something else. It requires a visionary, a wartime leader, someone who can rebuild the future of consumer tech before someone else beats them to it. Because if they don't move fast, Apple won't just get disrupted, it could get replaced. So what should you do if you own Apple stock? Watch closely. Because Apple isn't going to crash overnight. Even if OpenAI's device is a success, it's not going to kill the iPhone immediately. That's not how disruption works. This isn't a cliff, it's a slow fade. Just like Redbox didn't die the day Netflix announced streaming. It took years, but the writing was on the wall. And right now, Apple's writing is starting to show cracks. If they keep focusing on minor upgrades, better cameras, thinner devices, slightly faster chips, they'll get left behind. Because in this new phase of tech, those things don't matter anymore. Consumers don't care about millimeters and megapixels, they care about intelligence. Context, speed, frictionless access to powerful AI tools without even thinking about it. And if Apple wants to stay on top, they need more than just a product update. They may need a new strategy, a new roadmap, and possibly a new CEO to lead them through this next evolution. Because make no mistake, this is the most pivotal moment Apple has faced since the iPhone launch. If they get it right, they'll cement their dominance for another decade, but if they get it wrong, they'll fade. Slowly at first, then all at once. And here's the thing, Apple has the firepower. They're sitting on over $160 billion in cash. More than most countries, more than some tech sectors combined. But for years, Apple's been hesitant to use it. They've played it safe, opted for buybacks, raised the dividend, made minor acquisitions, nothing bold, nothing game-changing, but that era, it's over. In this new wave of AI, playing defense isn't enough. This is the time for Apple to go on offense. And if they want to stay relevant, if they want to dominate the next decade like they did the last, they need to start writing billion-dollar checks. They need to make strategic acquisitions, acquire talent, buy infrastructure, maybe even buy their way into this new AI hardware movement. Because if they don't, someone else will. OpenAI is already moving. Google is moving. Meta, Amazon, Nvidia, everyone's hunting for the next platform. Apple can't afford to sit on the sidelines. They have the cash, they have the brand, but do they have the courage to make the leap? That's the real question, and over the next few months, and especially over the next 1 to 2 years, you'll get your answer. So if you're a shareholder, watch carefully, because what Apple does between now and 2026 will define the next decade. So here's the bottom line. Apple isn't doomed, but it's vulnerable in a way we haven't seen in decades. They're late to AI. They fumbled their first big reveal, and now their most legendary designer just joined forces with their biggest future threat. The next iPhone moment might not come from Apple, and if they don't act fast, they could go from dominant to disrupted. So what should you do today? If you hold Apple stock, don't panic, but stay alert. Watch what they do with that cash. Watch who they acquire. Watch for signs of real urgency, not just marketing fluff. If you're on the sidelines, don't FOMO in. Let the next few quarters play out. If they pivot aggressively, there could be upside. If they stall, you'll be glad you waited. And if they announce a major shift, new leadership, bold acquisitions, or real AI breakthroughs, that's when it's time to pay attention. Because if they get this right, they're not just back in the game, they are the game. But if they don't, you'll wish you listened now. If you made it to the end, drop a comment saying, "Let Tim cook," and I'll see you in the next one.